Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Nolan was 34 years old and living a life many would consider ideal. After years of dedication to technology, he had built a successful career that provided financial comfort and the freedom to focus on what truly mattered to him. Yet, despite his solid professional life, something was missing: true love, a connection that went beyond superficial interests. He wholeheartedly believed love was built on mutual respect, generosity, and patience. So, when he met Megan, everything seemed to fall into place like a dream. Megan entered his life like a breath of fresh air. She was unlike anyone Nolan had ever met. Her smile was magnetic, and her stories, told with passion and enthusiasm, made Nolan feel like he was part of a more vibrant world. Reserved by nature, Nolan found Megan's ability to be the center of attention refreshing. This difference, instead of creating distance, initially brought them closer. For Nolan, Megan represented everything he wanted to experience: a life full of adventure and excitement. In the beginning, Nolan's efforts to win Megan over were heartfelt and full of care. He planned dates that felt like scenes from a romantic novel. He took her to restaurants with stunning views, organized weekend getaways, and even left thoughtful surprises, like a breakfast basket outside her apartment on a rainy morning. To Nolan, these gestures weren't excessive, they were ways to express his feelings. The sparkle in her eyes every time she received one of these surprises reinforced his belief that he was doing the right thing. Megan seemed impressed by his attention. She praised his gifts, told her friends how amazing Nolan was, and called him the perfect man. Her compliments reassured Nolan about their relationship. He didn't notice, or maybe chose to ignore, that Megan never asked about his feelings or reciprocated his efforts with the same intensity. For Nolan, seeing her happy was enough to believe they were building something special. The first sign that something was amiss appeared subtly. During dinner one evening, Megan jokingly mentioned she'd always imagined being with someone who truly shone in every way. Nolan laughed, thinking it was just another one of her witty remarks. But as weeks went by, similar comments began to surface more frequently. Even so, Nolan chose to dismiss them. He believed relationships, especially in their early stages, needed time to grow and stabilize. Nolan's friends, who knew him well, began noticing changes in him. Although he remained generous and caring, he seemed increasingly preoccupied with pleasing Megan, often ignoring his own needs. When questioned, he would smile and say, "That's what love is about, right? Putting the other person's happiness first." Deep down, he believed he was building a future with Megan, even if it meant making some sacrifices along the way. But there was something about Megan that Nolan couldn't fully grasp. While he saw his actions as expressions of love, Megan began treating them as expected routine. The sparkle in her eyes, which had captivated Nolan at first, was replaced by indifference. Even when Nolan planned something extraordinary, like a luxurious weekend getaway, Megan would only offer vague gratitude before mentioning something even more extravagant she wanted to do in the future. Nolan silently questioned whether he was doing something wrong by trying so hard. Despite his doubts, Nolan persisted. He believed in love's power to transform and connect people. To him, Megan was someone worth building something lasting with. Even when he noticed small signs that things weren't quite right, he clung to the hope that, with time, everything would balance out. After all, nobody was perfect, and love, as he saw it, required patience and dedication. Nolan didn't realize he was embarking on a journey that would test his deepest beliefs about love, sacrifice, and self-worth. At the time, everything still felt like a fairy tale, even with some storm clouds on the horizon. As the months passed, Nolan and Megan's relationship began to take on a different tone. What once seemed like a movie romance, filled with thoughtful gestures and special moments, started revealing an unsettling dynamic. Conversations that used to flow naturally became distant, peppered with comments disguised as jokes but leaving a bitter aftertaste. Megan, with her confident demeanor and sharp humor, often made jokes about Nolan. But these weren't simple jokes, they were remarks that chipped away at his self-esteem. At a social event, while chatting with friends, Megan made one of these jokes: "Look at Nolan, so dedicated to work that he barely has time to take care of himself. Imagine if I weren't here to add a touch of style." Everyone laughed, but Nolan felt the sting. He forced a smile, hiding his discomfort. Inside, a small doubt began to grow. Did these words, masked as playful banter, reflect what Megan truly thought of him? The pattern repeated itself on other occasions. During a dinner with Megan's colleagues, she casually mentioned how he wasn't as social as she was, describing him as a hopeless homebody. Although said lightly, the comment carried an implicit criticism, leaving Nolan feeling awkward. Not wanting to create tension, he avoided confronting her. He believed it was better to let it go, assuming Megan didn't mean to hurt him. But over time, those words started to weigh on him. Nolan began questioning his own behavior. Was he really falling short? Maybe he needed to try harder, be more outgoing, and meet her expectations better. He became increasingly focused on how he could please her even more, hoping it would erase the discomfort caused by her remarks. He convinced himself that investing more in the relationship would change the dynamic and help Megan realize how much he valued her. But there was something about Megan that Nolan couldn't ignore. When they were alone, she often seemed distant, as though she was physically present but mentally elsewhere. Initially, he attributed this to work stress or fatigue, but he began noticing it even during moments meant to bring them closer, like the dinners he prepared with so much care. Megan frequently looked at her phone, laughing at messages he didn't know the source of, while Nolan tried to engage her in conversations that rarely went beyond one-word answers. One day, Nolan decided to share how he was feeling. During a calm moment, he said, "Sometimes I feel like I'm putting in so much effort, and I don't know, maybe you don't see it." Without looking up from her phone, Megan replied in a casual tone, "Oh, Nolan, you're so sensitive. You don't have to make everything so big. Just relax." Her response felt like a cold splash of water. Instead of starting a meaningful dialogue, it felt like his feelings were being dismissed. Nolan reached a point where he felt torn. He wanted to believe Megan loved him and that these tough moments were just a phase that would eventually pass. Yet, he couldn't ignore how he felt. Her words, even when seemingly harmless, were shaping how he saw himself. The once confident and secure man was now doubting his own worth. Deep down, Nolan knew something was wrong, but he lacked the courage to face reality. The discomfort Nolan felt about Megan's behavior was like a growing cloud over their relationship. Small moments of disregard, absent looks, and words that seemed to carry hidden meanings were all signs that something wasn't working. Even so, Nolan continued clinging to the hope that, with time and patience, things could change. He didn't realize then that this hope was becoming a burden rather than the solution he desperately wanted. A night that Nolan had hoped would be special turned out to be a defining moment he would never forget. He had planned a dinner at an upscale restaurant, believing that, despite months of silent disappointments, this gesture could reignite the connection between him and Megan. He chose the perfect table, a cozy corner with a stunning view of the city lights. Everything was meticulously prepared, Megan's favorite flowers adorned the table, and he had pre-ordered her favorite wine. When Megan arrived, exuding her usual confidence and air of superiority, Nolan stood to greet her. She looked stunning, and for a moment, he felt lucky to have her by his side. But the charm quickly faded. Megan seemed more interested in the surroundings than in Nolan. Her eyes roamed the restaurant, scanning the people and details, as if searching for something more interesting than the man in front of her. As they talked, or rather, as Nolan tried to keep the conversation alive, Megan was absorbed in her phone, laughing at something she read. He made a timid attempt to bring her attention back, mentioning an interesting project he had recently completed. She briefly looked up and, without much enthusiasm, said, "That's great, Nolan. But have you seen this new bag they just released? It's simply perfect for me. You should get it for me as a gift. Caught off guard, Nolan hesitated. He had already spent a lot on gifts for Megan over the past months and knew this particular bag came with an exorbitant price tag. He tried to respond lightly, suggesting it might be something to consider another time. But Megan didn't like his response. Her face changed, and her tone, once casual, turned cold and impatient. Another time? Seriously, Nolan, she laughed, but it wasn't a warm or affectionate laugh. You should be grateful to have me. There are plenty of men who wouldn't think twice about it. Those words hit like a punch to the stomach. The once cozy restaurant now felt suffocating. Nolan felt a wave of emotions, sadness, frustration, even shame. He looked at Megan, hoping to see some sign of regret or softness in her expression, but there was none. Instead, she stared back with the same mix of indifference and superiority she had been showing for months. Her words echoed in Nolan's mind as he tried to process what had just happened. You should be grateful to have me. It was as if their entire relationship had been reduced to a transaction, where his presence was only valued as long as he met her expectations. For the first time, Nolan began seriously questioning what he was doing there. He took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. He didn't want to cause a scene in the restaurant, but he also knew he couldn't ignore how he felt. For the rest of the dinner, Nolan remained quiet, answering Megan's questions with short replies while she continued talking about trivial things as if nothing had happened. To Megan, it seemed the conversation was irrelevant, but for Nolan, it was a point of no return. By the end of the evening, as they drove home, Nolan knew something had shifted inside him. He realized that the love he felt for Megan wasn't enough to sustain a relationship where he wasn't valued. And for the first time in a long time, he started thinking that maybe it was time to let go of the hope that things would get better and face the harsh truth. The silence in the car was heavy. Megan seemed oblivious to the internal battle Nolan was fighting. She was more concerned with checking her messages than looking at him. Nolan, meanwhile, stared out the window, reflecting on how he had gotten to this point. He knew the decision he had to make wouldn't be easy, but something inside him told him the life he deserved was beyond this relationship. All he needed was the strength to take the next step. After weeks of trying to move forward in the relationship, Nolan realized ending things with Megan was inevitable. Her comment that night, "You should be grateful to have me," had become an open wound in his mind. But he didn't want to act impulsively. He needed to be sure he was choosing this for himself, for his dignity, and for the chance to find something more meaningful. So, on a sunny Sunday afternoon, he invited Megan over to talk at his place. Megan arrived with her usual confidence, as if they were about to discuss something trivial. Nolan, however, was resolute. He had rehearsed what to say for days, but when he looked at her, he realized he didn't need a script. He just needed to speak from the heart. "Megan," he began, his voice firm but tinged with sadness, "I feel like we're not on the same path. I've been trying so hard to make this work, but I don't feel valued for who I am. It feels like I'm just here to meet expectations that never stop growing." She interrupted with a short laugh, as if brushing off the weight of his words. "Oh, Nolan, you're overreacting. Why do you always take everything so seriously? We're together, aren't we? Isn't that enough?" For a moment, Nolan almost gave in. But then he remembered all the times he felt invisible, disposable, as if love was just a transaction. He knew he had to be honest. "It's not enough when what we have isn't built on mutual respect. I feel like what I bring to the table is never appreciated, and that hurts more than I can put into words." Megan was silent for a few seconds, but her face betrayed irritation. When she finally spoke, her words were sharp, "If you want to end this, just do it already. I don't need to sit here listening to drama. But let me tell you something, you'll never find someone like me." Those words, delivered with such disdain, didn't provoke the reaction Megan expected. Instead of anger or hesitation, Nolan felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: relief. For the first time, he saw clearly what was in front of him. Megan didn't want him to stay because she loved him, she wanted him to stay because it was convenient. "You're right, Megan," Nolan replied, his voice now steadier. "I'll never find someone like you. And honestly, that's exactly what I need." The conversation ended there. Megan grabbed her things and left without looking back, while Nolan stood in the living room, feeling a mix of emptiness and freedom. It was strange to realize that something he had longed for so deeply now felt more like a burden being lifted from his shoulders. The days that followed were a mix of reflection and rebuilding. Nolan threw himself into work, reconnected with friends he hadn't seen in ages, and rediscovered hobbies he had set aside. He began to remember who he was before Megan, before he lost himself in a relationship that took so much without giving anything back. It was during this time that an unexpected revelation came his way. A mutual friend, perhaps unintentionally, let slip a comment about Megan. "You know," the friend said casually, "I heard she was seeing that businessman, Adrian, while she was still with you." Everyone in her circle knew. The words seemed surreal. Nolan sat in silence for a few seconds, trying to process. He repeated the name in his mind, Adrian. He had heard Megan mention him before, always casually, as if he were someone distant. But now, it all made sense: the moments of distraction, the constant phone use, the laughter that wasn't for him. Everything painfully fell into place. Though the confirmation stung, Nolan didn't let anger consume him. Instead, he saw it as validation of what he already felt. Megan had never truly been with him, and her betrayal only reinforced that ending the relationship had been the right choice. But fate had an ironic twist in store for her. Adrian, upon learning Megan was single, began to see the truth about her as well. He realized Megan didn't love him either but was only interested in what he could offer. Just as she had with Nolan, Megan sought material support and a pedestal for her demanding lifestyle. And, like Nolan, Adrian decided to walk away. Megan, once so confident in her position, now found herself alone, facing the consequences of her choices. Meanwhile, Nolan moved on, not with the weight of betrayal but with the clarity that he deserved so much more than what he had tolerated for so long. The months that followed were transformative for Nolan. The revelation of Megan's betrayal and her exit from his life pushed him into a journey of self-discovery. For the first time in years, he felt truly free to focus on himself, on what truly mattered, and most importantly, on what he deserved. It wasn't an easy path. There were moments of sadness and self-doubt, but there was also something new, a sense of rebuilding not just his life but also his self-worth. He threw himself into work with renewed passion, but this time with balance. Instead of using his responsibilities as a distraction, he began to appreciate the impact he was making in his field, developing projects that filled him with pride. More importantly, Nolan learned to dedicate time to himself. He rediscovered the joy of simple activities that had been overshadowed by his relationship with Megan: walks in the park, reading books he had put aside, and occasional short trips to peaceful places where he could reconnect with nature. During one of these getaways, in a small coastal town, Nolan met Charlotte. It wasn't planned, it was the kind of meeting that happens when you least expect it. She was an artist and owner of a small gallery showcasing her vibrant, deeply meaningful works. Nolan had entered the gallery drawn by a painting in the window, a sunlit field surrounded by mountains that radiated a peace he hadn't felt in ages. Charlotte was there, arranging some pieces, and the warm smile she gave Nolan was the first step towards something he hadn't realized he was ready to find. They began talking about art, but the conversation soon expanded to deeper topics. Charlotte had a calm and genuine way of speaking that made Nolan feel at ease, as though he could be completely himself without fear of judgment. She listened with genuine interest, something he hadn't experienced in a long time. There were no games, no demands, just two people sharing simple, honest moments. As they got to know each other, Nolan realized Charlotte was everything he'd ever wanted in a partner but never knew how to articulate. She was kind, supportive, and above all, authentic. She wasn't impressed by money or status. What drew her was Nolan's essence, his kindness, his passion for his work, and his deep capacity for love. With Charlotte, Nolan finally understood what it felt like to be valued for who he truly was. While Nolan was embracing this new chapter, Megan was on a very different path. Without Nolan or Adrian, she found herself for the first time without the foundations she had manipulated to maintain her comfortable life. Friends who had once surrounded her began to distance themselves, realizing their relationships with Megan were mostly one-sided. The charm she had used to attract and keep people around began to fade, and Megan was forced to face a reality she had avoided for years: loneliness. It was a stark contrast to the life Nolan was now enjoying. Fate, however, seemed intent on teaching Megan one final lesson. In a chance encounter with an old friend, she heard about Nolan's new life and his relationship with Charlotte. While the news shouldn't have affected her anymore, Megan felt a pang in her chest. It wasn't just regret, it was the realization that she had lost something precious, something she would never have again. Nolan, on the other hand, was thriving in a genuine and fulfilling love. He and Charlotte shared not only happy moments but also plans for the future. Together, they decided to use their talents for a greater purpose. Nolan began funding community tech projects to help young people prepare for the workforce, while Charlotte organized art workshops for underprivileged children. They combined their passions to make a difference in the world. That day in the gallery, months ago, when Nolan had first walked in, he never imagined that moment would change his life. But looking back, he knew everything, even the pain Megan caused, had led him to this point. He had learned to value himself, to refuse to settle for less than he deserved, and most importantly, to recognize the kind of love that was truly worthwhile. With Charlotte by his side, he finally found the peace and happiness he had been searching for. And so, the man who had once been consumed by doubt and disappointment found not only true love but also a new perspective on what it means to live fully. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.